Yeah. Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. I'm a headliner.
What is going on, Headliner Nation? Jake, Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully everybody's doing well out there today. Welcome to Week 6 here, Fantasy Football, where today we're talking about running backs for starting and sitting. Now, full disclosure, I did not have a good Monday yesterday, and no, it was nothing to do with football-related instances. It was just one of those days where I'm still a little bit pissed at some things. But you know what? I'm taking that energy. I'm harnessing that energy. I'm putting it into this video, and it's going to be a mother banger. Because this energy's got to go somewhere, Day, and this is where we're going to do it. So before we get into all of the matchups here this week, there's two things. First thing, how do we do in Week 5? And seeing this number makes me a little bit happier. Because out of the 59 running backs that I discussed last week on this episode that finished their games this past weekend, 49 of them were correct for an accuracy percentage of 83%. I think that may be an all-time high for me, if I'm not mistaken. I'd have to go back and check, but I really don't know. Some of the biggest misses, Myles Gaskin, by far. All of a sudden, Brian Flores decided to use the guy. It's amazing what happens when you use Myles Gaskin. A.J. Dillon continues to kind of be a thing in Green Bay. Michael Carter had himself a solid day in London. Some of the biggest hits, though, Antonio Gibson. We cannot fade Antonio Gibson. DeAndre Swift. Now, DeAndre Swift has kind of proven here that if you just give him volume, Dan, that he can produce, Dan, and we kind of saw it. The problem is you don't utilize him till the fourth quarter, Dan. Then we also have Leonard Fournette. I have Leonard Fournette on here because he's kind of been the guy that is the go-to in this backfield. A lot of people not, sold on this backfield at all, but even though Gio Bernard returned, Leonard Fournette still a solid day, one of our hits here this past week. But I also have to remind you about our October giveaway. And it's a huge giveaway. It's a signed Christian McCaffrey jersey. It's a Manscaped Perfect Package 4.0. It's a mystery pylon from Pristine Auction, a $50 Fanatics gift card, and all you need to do is sign up for a new account on Prize Picks and use the referral code Headliners. You make your initial deposit of at least $20. They'll match it all the way up to $100, and you are entered in to win. Now, maybe you're sitting here, you're looking at the screen, and you can see over my shoulder 137,000 subscribers, and you're like, I got no chance at winning this. Let me just be upfront and honest with you, because that's how I'm feeling today. As of right now, I've only had 70 people sign up, so you have plenty of opportunity to get in on this right now and have a great chance of winning a extremely valuable package for you here this month. Looking forward to giving that away. But now it's time we dive into Week 6. Some of the best running backs, some of the guys we should be a little bit worried about here this week. But we're kicking it off Thursday Night Football. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Philadelphia Eagles. And it's time I vent a little bit of this frustration. I look directly into the camera, stare directly into the soul of Nick Sirianni, head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. Nick, figure it out, Nick. I mean, you got Miles Sanders. And maybe you don't like Miles Sanders. You got Kenneth Gainwell, too. You drafted him. I mean, do you know how to use these guys? Are you telling me, Nick, that the Atlanta Falcons figured out how to use Cordarrelle Patterson efficiently on a weekly basis, but you can't figure out Miles Sanders or Kenneth Gainwell in an offense that really needs weapons in the short to intermediate passing game? You're too busy trying to force the ball down the field. In case you haven't noticed, Jalen Hurts kind of struggles consistently going deep down the field. He needs someone to take the pressure off him, Nick. That would be Miles Sanders and Kenneth Gainwell. Now, at least I like to see Miles Sanders on the field. He was out there for 75% of the snaps this past week, but he's currently running back 32. Sure, he had 5 targets last week, but they went absolutely nowhere. They were not designed to get him the ball in space. He's got no opportunity to do anything with the passes and opportunities he is getting. It's very frustrating to sit back and see such great talents be absolutely wasted on a consistent basis. And now they go up against Tampa Bay. Now, if you can say anything about the Tampa Bay defense, it's really that they're vulnerable to pass-catching backs, right? We just saw Myles Gaskin last week get 10 targets for 10 receptions, 74 yards, and 2 touchdowns against this same defense. But the usage of Kenneth Gainwell, up and down, really hard to trust because at times he doesn't even see the field at all. Miles Sanders, I mean, he may be out there, but you're really not utilizing the talent. You're not trying to figure out a way to get him more involved. It's a little bit risky to start. So unless you got some big cojones out there in fantasy football world, it's really scary to start Miles Sanders or Kenneth Gainwell right now. The floor is just so low on a weekly basis. Now, the ceilings are huge, but we barely ever get an opportunity to see the ceilings there in Philadelphia. In my opinion, it's just a little bit too risky to start until Nick can figure out how to get things going there in Philadelphia. But I will say this. We are going to have a Myles Gaskin type game out of Miles Sanders here pretty soon. It's going to happen. The big game, he's going to go out there and get like 26 points in a week. It's going to happen at some point. The bad part is, just like Myles Gaskin, it's going to happen on a lot of people's bench because of the way the season has started. As of right now, I can't do it. Maybe you're in a multi-flex league, a really deep league. Sure, I'll take a stab at Miles Sanders almost every week because of that ceiling. But as of right now, I prefer to just sit him until we can figure out this backfield going forward. And as for Tampa Bay, Leonard Fournette still seems to be the best option here in Tampa Bay. Now, getting Gio Bernard back kind of hurts a little bit, takes away some of that pass catching upside that we've seen Fournette get over the past few games. Does Gio come back and kind of play like that old school James White role that Tom Brady used to have in New England? That's kind of how I see it. And then you got Ronald Jones just getting whatever scraps are left, or whatever falls off the table is what goes onto Rojo's plate at this point. He's kind of an afterthought. Leonard Fournette getting the bulk of the touches, passing game work a little bit more towards Gio Bernard. But they're somewhat safer, right? I mean, Leonard Fournette's getting the scoring opportunities. He's currently running back 16 overall in half PPR fantasy football. Tom Brady's going to give him opportunities there on the goal line. They're going to score a lot of points in Tampa Bay. So with that volume, plus the potential touchdown upside going up against Philadelphia, who allows just over 20 fantasy points per game, Gio a little bit more touchdown dependent and not quite to that safe flex spot yet, but I'll continue to start Leonard Fournette here in week 6. Which takes us to Sunday football, Miami Dolphins, Jacksonville Jaguars. And it's amazing what happens when Myles Gaskin gets touches, right? I mean, he scored more points in week 5 than he did in weeks 1 through 4 combined. Any coincidence that he also played the highest snap percentage of the season was 69%? Nice. No, there's really not. That's the highest percentage he's played in a game so far this year. And when he touches the ball, he does things with it. So why the inconsistent usage? I mean, in my opinion, Brian Flores is just getting a little bit too cute at times, right? The Dolphins are struggling for the most part here in 2021. Use the guys you got. What are you trying to prove by taking the ball out of the hands of the guys who are actually producing when getting the opportunities? Myles Gaskin right now is averaging over 5 yards per carry in 4 out of the 5 games this season. The only game he hasn't was the game that Flores basically didn't even play him. That is telling, right? Obviously, when this guy is in the game and he's touching the football, he's doing something with it. Plus, he's great in the passing game, right? We just talked about him in the last matchup against Tampa Bay last week. 10 receptions out of this guy for 2 touchdowns. Definitely has that huge ability. Plus, now this week they get the Jacksonville Jaguars, who allow over 30 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. Does Tua return? He's eligible to return. Does he? He just started throwing. We have to wait and see on that. But the wide receiving options still banged up with Devontae Parker and Will Fuller. They need to utilize Myles Gaskin more. Going to start him here this week. For Jacksonville, Urban Meyer just needs more J-Rob, like we all need more cowbell out there. Takes the focus off of him, right? Urban Meyer may be the biggest John Gruden fan of all time right now because the spotlight's no longer on Urban Meyer right this second. But James Robinson needs more targets through the air. I don't want to be greedy here. I really don't. But there was only 1 target last week in the Jacksonville Jaguars offense to a running back. But yet they're going out there and they're targeting the likes of Jamal Agnew and Tavon Austin. Why? Well, I don't understand. I mean, this is kind of why sucky teams continue to suck, right? Urban Meyer is failing. As of right now, one of the best things he has going for him is James Robinson, and they need to continue to feed him. Now, going up against the Miami Dolphins, they allow also over 30 fantasy points per game. I'm looking for another big J-Rob game here. He's definitely going to be a start, and I'm also heading over to Prize Picks, where I'm going to smash the over on 74.5 rushing yards on James Robinson, a number that he's been able to eclipse here in the past few weeks, and definitely a great opportunity in a great matchup going up against the Miami Dolphins. Love me some J-Rob here this week. Out to Chicago now for the Bears and the Packers, and we already know we're going to start Aaron Jones. That's a weekly thing. We don't need to discuss that. But what about A.J. Dillon? I mean, have they all of a sudden given him last year's Jamal Williams role? Because now in back-to-back games, he's seen at least 12 touches, but he's not on the field a whole lot. He's not taking a job away from Aaron Jones. He only played 21 offensive snaps, but now they get a matchup going up against Chicago, a very solid run defense, allowing right around 18 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. I'm really watching A.J. Dillon at this point, not quite to the point where I want to start him at, unless you're in a deep league, a 14, a 16-team league, maybe you start 2, 3, 4 flex spots, then yeah, sure, I'll take a stab at A.J. Dillon, but in normal 10 to 12-man leagues, not yet, right? He's not to that point yet, a little bit too touchdown dependent because he's just not seeing the amount of offensive snaps we need him to see to be safe on a weekly basis. So right now, I'm just starting Aaron Jones. As for Chicago, we sat on this show last week, and I told you about a kid named Khalil Herbert and said, just pay attention to the guy, right? It's not just going to be all Damian Williams. And it wasn't, because Khalil Herbert played 53% of the snaps and really came out to a true 50-50 split with Damian Williams. How close was it? They both had exactly 18 touches apiece. Now, slightly more efficient were the numbers on the ground for Khalil Herbert, but he got no passing work, right? The passing work going the way of Damian Williams. Both of these options really need a touchdown to have that great ceiling. Well, the good part here is they're going up against the Green Bay Packers, who have a tendency to put up some points on the board. That's going to mean that Chicago is going to have to keep their foot on the gas and try to continue to keep pace. That leans a little bit more towards the pass-catching running backs in this offense, which is, as of right now, Damian Williams. In my opinion, still the safer start in this backfield, but I am not giving up on Khalil Herbert. He is somebody that I'm paying close attention to, because if this 50-50 split continues, depending on how long it really takes to get going, because David Montgomery not going to be out the entire year, it's somebody to pay attention to. Another one of these guys, though, where if you're in a 16-teamer, maybe you start 2, 3, 4 flex spots, Khalil Herbert isn't a bad guy here for this week, but in normal 10 to 12 team leagues, not somebody who's quite able to head into the start column just yet. Now we're to Detroit for the Lions and Bengals. It was good to see Joe Mixon on the field this week. Actually scored a touchdown, which was great because a lot of people didn't even know if he was going to play or not. Now we're hearing word that Samaje Perine, he's been placed on the COVID reserve list, kind of unsure whether or not he'll be available this weekend or not. So what does that mean going forward? Well, seems like we're still going to have Joe Mixon. If Mixon is starting, he's probably in your fantasy lineup as well. But what about rookie Chris Evans? He's somebody who could definitely see an uptick in touches if there is no Samaje Perine. As of right now, Chris Evans isn't a fantasy starter just yet. I cannot put an unproven rookie in a fantasy lineup right now, even though bye weeks have started. There's so many other better options with safer floors than just Chris Evans, but he is a name to pay attention to. But we want to start running backs against Detroit. Why do we want to do that? It's because they give up over 30 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. Start Joe Mixon if he is healthy, because this is the kind of matchup we want to start running backs against. As for Detroit, though, Dan, we had this talk last week, Dan. I made direct eye contact. I thought we had a connection. Dan, snap out of it. Dan, stop crying and post-game press conference. I love to see the emotion in sports, but come on, Dan. You can't wait until the fourth quarter to finally start getting the ball in the hands of your best players. I mean, why is DeAndre Swift kind of, invisible until the fourth quarter? It makes no sense to me. We see Jared Goff struggling down the field. Now Quintez Cephas is hurt. Can't really get TJ Hawkinson involved on a weekly basis. And yet we still wait every single week to try to get DeAndre Swift the ball more and more and more, because when he touches it, he does great things with it. Stop being cute, Dan. Get him the ball earlier. Don't always have to come from behind. Let's try to utilize the weapons we have at the start of the game. Novel idea. Going up against the Cincinnati Bengals, who are right around 21 fantasy points per game. We know the pass catching role still going the way of DeAndre Swift, and now they're finally starting to, I guess they're fading away Jamal Williams. At this point, I don't know. His snap percentages are down in the 30%. So I just can't trust starting him as of right now. He's not even hardly playing at this point. They're waiting for DeAndre Swift, but the ceiling is huge, and he's showing you that on a weekly basis. As of right now, still starting DeAndre Swift. Over to Indianapolis for the Colts and the Texans, and Houston is easy, right? I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here. We sit everybody in Houston because there's very limited scoring chances. They're never consistent in this offense. They're all getting touches, right? Mark Ingram and David Johnson and Phillip Lindsay on a weekly basis. You got Mark Ingram getting the bulk of the work on the ground, which means he could be somewhat viable. But the dude's averaging like 3 yards a carry. It's just not good. We're sitting everybody in Houston every single week as of right now. For Indianapolis, I love seeing Jonathan Taylor go off, right? I mean, I really hope he continues to get the touches. A lot of people frustrated in the first half to see some Marlon Mack, to see some Nyheim Hines. Marlon Mack a little confusing, but not surprising, right? We talked about that months ago that when they re-signed him and brought him back, he was going to get touches at times, even though he wants out. It's just the way they run their offense, but the bulk of the touches, the bulk of the big plays, the touchdown opportunities, they're going the way of Jonathan Taylor. We're seeing less and less targets go the way of Nyheim Hines, utilizing Jonathan Taylor more in the passing game, which is absolutely great. He's taken over, and now he gets the Houston Texans, who allow over 25 fantasy points per game. Shouldn't be a surprise here. With the inconsistent usage of Hines and Mack, they're not start worthy yet, but Jonathan Taylor, he's finding himself in the start column once again. Out to the Big Apple now for the Giants and Rams, and I'm really thankful for the inefficiency of Sony Michel because he continues to underperform, at least when he touches the ball, right? And he's under 4 yards per carry on average over the last 3 games. And honestly, I want more Darrell Henderson, currently running back 14, and he's missed a game already this year. But this is a great opportunity for some big numbers this week, going up against the Giants, who allow right around 28 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. Plus, the Rams give him scoring opportunities, right? A very high-powered offense that gives those touchdown opportunities. Sure, Matthew Stafford's down there chucking it down the field more times than maybe the running backs want to see, but it's opening up the scoring opportunities. That passing game opens up running lanes and really benefits Darrell Henderson. I really would hope that this is the week he kind of gets back to like an 80% snap share or so, because Sony Michel just isn't cutting it, right? Back-to-back weeks now for Darrell Henderson with at least 18 touches, so we know he's kind of overcome the rib injury he had earlier in the season. He's going to remain a start. For New York, I just want to curse because Saquon Barkley is hurt again. Sorry about that. Got a little carried away. Emotions took over for a second. But yeah, no Saquon Barkley. Does seem like we escaped major injury, hoping he could be back here in just a couple weeks. A low ankle sprain week to week. Fingers crossed on that. So now we look forward to Devontae Booker. And he gets a matchup against the Rams, which is not ideal, but there are so many injuries in New York. I mean, you got Kenny Golladay banged up, and Sterling Shepard, and Darius Slayton, and Daniel Jones is even banged up. Now no Saquon Barkley. We could see a whole lot of Devontae Booker. And based off of the volume in this offense that he could see and the pass-catching upside that he has, he could have a decent floor. Is he somebody who's going to have a super high ceiling? No, that's too much of a risk for me. I'm going to have Devontae Booker as a start based off of the volume he could see here in week 6. However, when it comes to my top 40 rankings, end of the week, he's not going to be very high in them. He's going to be, towards the bottom half of these rankings because the confidence level in it just isn't there. But the volume could be a decent spot start if needed. Maybe you lost Saquon Barkley and you have a few guys on bye this week. It all just depends how you could really utilize Devontae Booker. But as of right now, he's going to find himself in the start column here this week. Over to Kansas City and the Washington football team. Actually, a game I'm going to go to this weekend. Taking my son there for his birthday. Going to be a great time. But as pumped as I am to see Antonio Gibson excel and perform last week in week 5, it really sucks to see CEH go down. A sprained MCL. Going to miss a few weeks. What does that look like? We're going to have to talk to the doc end of the week, so make sure you stay tuned for the injury recap episode. But now we look forward to Darrell Williams. And we've spoke on him a lot on this channel. Actually, in the offseason, we brought up the name Darrell Williams quite a bit as somebody to really pay attention to, because if CEH had struggled or an injury, Darrell Williams was going to be the guy, and now it seems like he's going to get that opportunity for a few weeks. He's somebody who's a very capable backup. He can catch passes out of the backfield. He can run it on the goal line. He's somebody who's actually taken goal line carries away at times in the past from CEH. He's very capable. And for the Washington football defense, it's still struggling. They're allowing over 27 fantasy points per game, 9th most in the NFL to opposing running backs. It's a trusted offense that he knows, right? I mean, he knows this. It's not like it's some new guy coming off the street. He's been in this offense. He's been trusted in this offense before. Like I said, able to catch passes and busted in there on the goal line. I'm going to start Darrell Williams here this week against the Washington football team. As for Antonio Gibson and the football team, he really showed you this past week why you can't give up on this guy, why you can't sit him. He had 22 touches for 72 total yards and 2 touchdowns and absolutely dominated the touches. J.D. McKissick was nowhere to be found, which is a great sign as to the health of Antonio Gibson. But now he gets the Kansas City Chiefs, who allow right around 26 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs, 10th most in the NFL. Still a little bit limited in the pass catching game. Kind of unclear as to why they're not using a former wide receiver more in the passing game. And he is somewhat touchdown dependent on a weekly basis, but the ceiling is too high to ever sit this guy. They're going to need playmakers in this game. If Kansas City can figure out their offense and start putting up points again, which can happen in the blink of an eye, Washington needs the same amount of playmakers on their side to try to match Kansas City. One of the best ones they got is Antonio Gibson. Now that J.D. McKissic's usage is somewhat up and down, hard to trust him, so Antonio Gibson is going to be the guy for me this week in Washington. Out to Carolina now for the Panthers and Vikings in my Manscaped matchup of the week. That's right, fellas. As soon as this show is over, head over to manscaped.com. Get yourself something nice for your travel bag, something other than just a ball trimmer. If you're looking for some other products, they have you covered, and there's some good stuff coming out here in the coming weeks. I kind of got a sneak peek at some of their new products coming up. There's some good stuff coming, so make sure you head over there, get yourself something nice. Use that promo code Headliners, 20% off and free shipping. But to this matchup now of the Vikings and the Panthers, the matchup of what could be, right? Dalvin Cook and Christian McCaffrey, do they return this week from injury? I would love to see Dalvin Cook return, right? He's been super close the past couple weeks, but Alexander Mattison has looked really well while he's been injured. There's really no reason for them to rush back Dalvin Cook, but what that also tells me is that when Cook is ready to go and Cook does play, he should be a lot closer to 100% because they know that they're not risking it as much as before. Maybe in years past, they trot out Dalvin Cook a little bit over the past few weeks, and he just re-aggravates it. They're taking it slower this year. They're making sure they want to get him back to full health. And like I said, with Alexander Mattison playing so well, it's given him that opportunity to do that. But this is a very tough matchup, right? Going up against the Carolina Panthers is not ideal if you're an opposing running back because they only give up right around 12 fantasy points per game, second fewest in the NFL. They just held Philadelphia to 61 rushing yards to their running backs. But Philadelphia sucks running the ball, so I don't know if I can really use that as a baseline to compare anything to. They're a great run defense in Carolina. And Minnesota has stayed committed to getting volume to their running backs. Get this, the lead back has had at least 24 touches a game in 4 out of 5 games this season for the Minnesota Vikings. They like to get the running backs involved. It opens up the passing game to the likes of Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. If Dalvin Cook starts, he's in your lineup. Obviously, he's good to go. You can't sit him whatsoever. If he sits, though, yes, I will once again start Alexander Mattison, who has kind of looked like a Dalvin Cook clone here, a Dalvin Cook light, like the diet version the past couple weeks. So I have no issue starting him as long as Dalvin Cook is out. Now, if Cook plays, do I want to start Madison? No, I don't. That's too much of a split. And like I said, if Cook is in the game, they're going to utilize him early and often. For Carolina, do we see Christian McCaffrey back this week? He was close, it sounded like, in week 5. He thought he had a chance. Matt Rule was like, not so much. However, Matt Rule has already come out and said that he's hopeful to have CMC here this week. And that would be great because Minnesota allows right around 26 fantasy points per game. And you never, ever sit Christian McCaffrey when he's healthy and in the lineup because the guy is a lock almost for 20 fantasy points per game. If CMC sits, do I want to start Chuba Hubbard? Yes. Yes, I do. I'm firing up Chuba if CMC sits. Guy had 29 touches last week. Love to see that type of volume from the rookie. And in a good matchup, I'll start either one of these guys, whoever gets that starting nod in Carolina. Chargers and Ravens now, and I came into this season and I went back and looked. I had Austin Eckler as my running back 10. It just kind of felt right to me. I didn't have any heartburn about it. It felt like a good spot. I don't think I had him high enough because the guy is out there just killing it. 4 straight games with at least 100 total yards, 7 touchdowns in 5 games. He's caught 23 out of the 25 targets he's seen, and he's averaging 5.2 yards per carry on the ground. I mean, the guy is playing great. Plus, he loves fantasy football. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. Austin Eckler out there representing the game. But Baltimore was just tore up through the air by Jonathan Taylor in week 5. Do we see the same type of thing from Austin Eckler? Entirely possible. But the way he's playing, it wouldn't really matter. You're not sitting Austin Eckler right now. Dude is on a mission. Love what he's doing. For Baltimore, how can you really quote unquote want to start anyone here in this backfield? No one is getting huge volume. There's limited goal line opportunities in this offense, and when they get inside the 5, they're looking the way of Mark Andrews. So there's really not a lot of goal line carries to go around. The passing game is really improving in Baltimore. They're starting to move down the field more, and now they're going to get Rashad Bateman back, and that's only going to increase the passing game. The Chargers allow right around 28 fantasy points per game, but this backfield is a mess with Latavius Murray and Devontae Freeman, Tyson Williams, and do they activate Le'Veon Bell again at some point? There's just too many question marks. Even though the matchup is decent, they're not utilizing the running backs consistently. It's not just one guy in this backfield for the first time in a long time. They're not even two guys in this backfield you can really rely on a weekly basis. So as of right now, I'm just avoiding the backfield of Baltimore until we get a little bit more clarity, a little bit more consistency, at least to one guy here moving forward. Over to the Cardinals and Browns now. Can we just stop complaining about Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt and just enjoy it? They're two top 10 running backs. That's what we wanted, right? We want the top 10 guys. That's why we push these guys so hard in the offseason. But some of the comments and complaints that we see on social media or here on YouTube, Nick Chubb is a touchdown-dependent running back too. What? The guy's basically a league leader in rushing, a top 10 fantasy running back. He's getting touchdown opportunities. He's getting 20-plus touches a game behind arguably one of the best offensive lines in all of football on a team that runs almost more than anybody else. I mean, that's exactly what you want in fantasy football. You're lining yourself up for great days. Now, if you're complaining that Kareem Hunt is getting the touches or he's taking the touchdowns away from Nick Chubb, watch the football games and don't just look at the box scores. There was one instance this past week where Nick Chubb got them almost all the way down the field, inside the 5. They then brought out Nick Chubb and brought in Kareem Hunt for the touchdown. Why did that happen? If you watch the game, you can see that after Chubb made a run to get them into that position, he motioned to the sidelines to be substituted. He went out of the game, they brought in Kareem Hunt, and he scored. You have to remember, these NFL teams, these NFL running backs, they do not care about our fantasy football lineups or our fantasy football points. They care about points, they care about winning, and at that point, Nick Chubb felt he wasn't the best opportunity or the best person to finish that play. If you're tired, you're tired. The guy is out there performing and doing something every time he touches the ball. The big playability is there. The short yardage is there. Just enjoy it. You don't be impatient. They're both top 10 running backs, and that's exactly what we want in fantasy football, and their must-starts every single week. Rant over. For Arizona, kind of disappointing week 5 for Chase Edmonds, right? But we did see another James Conner touchdown. That is now 3 straight games with at least 1 touchdown for James Conner. Is Chase Edmonds still bothered by the shoulder injury? Slightly, I imagine. That's something we need to really pay attention to here this week. Watch the practice reports, update you on the injury reports later in the week. But this is a tough matchup for them. Going up against Cleveland, they allowed under 20 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. And when you got 2 guys that are really splitting touches right now, especially with James Conner being the guy who's getting the touchdowns and the short yardage work, the goal line work, it really makes him a little bit safer as of right now until we find out more information on Chase Edmonds and how limited is he going to be. At this point, James Conner is going to be a start, Chase Edmonds as a sit, but James Conner is not going to be somebody who is highly ranked for me here this week, more of a flex option at best until we get more information on Chase Edmonds, because like I said, this isn't an easy matchup to begin with. Raiders and Broncos now, and unless you live under a rock, you realize that there is no more John Gruden there for the Las Vegas Raiders, and Urban Meyer still super thankful out there doing a happy dance somewhere. But does Josh Jacobs continue to get the volume we've seen from him in years past? I imagine we do, but the problem is he's just so inefficient and a little bit more touchdown dependent with the touches he's getting. Now, new head coach, I'm probably going to butcher his last name, Rich Bisaccia, I think is how you say it. How is he going to utilize the backs here in the backfield? Heavy Josh Jacobs? Are we going to see a little bit more of a split between him and Kenyon Drake? But this is a super tough matchup going up against Denver, who allows only 13 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. You really can't look elsewhere on this team, though. In my opinion, it's still Josh Jacobs' backfield. He seems to be healthy-ish. There's some other injuries in this offense. I would expect them to try to utilize the running game to take some of the pressure off of Derek Carr with all the drama they have going on this week. I will actually start Josh Jacobs, sit Kenyon Drake, but Josh Jacobs is another one of those guys who's not going to be ranked too high for me this week. For Denver, I've been saying this for weeks. Is anybody out there agree with me yet that Javonte Williams is the better option in this running game? I mean, I just like Javonte Williams a lot more than Melvin Gordon at this point. He only had 8 carries last week, though, but turned it into 61 yards against the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's 7.6 yards per carry. Right now, he's hovering right around 40% snap share, but in my opinion, he just looks better than Melvin Gordon. Now, the Vegas Raiders, they allow right around 25 fantasy points per game, but there's not a lot of touchdowns on the ground to go around in Denver. Really hard for me to feel confident about either one of these guys on a weekly basis. This is just too good of a matchup, though, for me to sit both of these guys. In my opinion, somebody's scoring a touchdown this week. I have to continue to go with my gut. I have to continue to trust the eye test that I've seen over the past few weeks. And the guy I'm choosing this week, it's going to be Javonte Williams. Cowboys and Patriots now, and I think Damian Harris is in the doghouse, y'all, for a while. I mean, he got another fumble, which doesn't help things, but he's also hurt, dealing with a rib injury. Not looking good for one Damian Harris as of right now, especially not in a Bill Belichick offense. So now what is it? It's Ramondre Stevenson time, I think. I mean, he led this backfield in touches after the injury to Damian Harris this past week, but the offensive line in New England is very banged up, and now they get a matchup going up against the Dallas Cowboys, who are top 10 in the NFL against opposing running backs, allowing only 16 fantasy points per game. Now, New England's offense, they just look lost at times, right? They just look confused. Mac Jones can either look like an all-pro or he can look like a straight-up rookie, right? And it's really a hit-or-miss thing on a weekly basis. Looked great against Tampa Bay. Did not look great this past week. So kind of hard to trust anybody here. I do like the prospect of Ramondre Stevenson. Do I want to automatically throw him into my lineup in a difficult matchup? No, I don't. So as of right now, I'm going to sit everybody in New England. For Dallas, Zeke looking good, right? Zeke looking spicy. 3 straight games now with at least 100 total yards, and has now a touchdown in 4 straight games. This is exactly what people wanted to see from Zeke Elliott when they drafted him. He's averaging over 5 yards per carry over his last 3 games, and now a matchup against New England, who allows right around 20 fantasy points per game. We're definitely starting Zeke. For Tony Pollard, he's so hit or miss, right? He plays well when he gets touches, and he's had 10-plus touches in 4 straight games. But is he really going to be needed against the New England Patriots? That's somewhat debatable, right? I mean, he's not somebody who's going to have to be relied upon. They're not going to be probably playing from behind and having to catch up and utilize Tony Pollard more in the passing game. So he's maybe one of those guys that gets some garbage points late if they want to rest Zeke. For that reason, I'm going to make him a low-end flex start, lowered my rankings here this week for week 6. Last game Sunday, Seattle Seahawks, Pittsburgh Steelers, and Najee Harris out there running like a grown-ass man on a weekly basis. I just hope they don't wear the kid out down the stretch. He's had at least 21 touches now in 3 straight games, and just coming off of his first 100-yard rushing day. He's had at least 5 targets in the last 4 games. Now he gets a matchup against Seattle, who allows over 30 fantasy points per game. This is a smash start for Najee Harris. Plus, I'm also heading over to Prize Picks. Going to smash the over there as well at 70.5 rushing yards. Love that over on Prize Picks. Don't miss out on that one. For Seattle, does Chris Carson come back? If he does, how much of a split is there between him and Alex Collins? Because this past week, we saw Alex Collins, we saw DJ Dallas, we saw Travis Homer, all getting touches. Is that what we're going to kind of see going forward, even if Carson plays? Because if it is, I don't know if I like that. Plus, no Russell Wilson, which means limited scoring opportunities. So a split backfield with limiting scoring opportunities with a guy coming off of an injury is kind of like a recipe for disaster. Now, Pittsburgh, they're top 10 versus opposing running backs, allowing right around 15 fantasy points per game. This isn't a game where I really want to tempt fate in this backfield. I'll continue to watch the practice reports. I'll watch the injury reports, but I prefer to give it a week. Let's see how this backfield plays out with no Russell Wilson and sit everybody in Seattle. Takes us to Monday Night Football, Buffalo Bills, Tennessee Titans. And man, I just wish Derrick Henry had some upside in PPR leagues. I wish I didn't play PPR so I could draft Derrick Henry. Man, people overthink this stuff sometimes way too much. Derrick Henry is a beast, and he is not like any other running back in the NFL. The guy's number 1 across all formats in fantasy football. This is a tough matchup, though. Buffalo's defense is no joke. They got great D in Buffalo. Or so never mind. Anyway, they're number 1 against opposing running backs, and they're only allowing right around 12 fantasy points per game. So the ceiling this week for Derrick Henry may be a little bit lower. Do I want to go out there and expect 30 points from Derrick Henry this week? No, but I'm never going to sit him either. For Buffalo, speaking of low ceilings, it's just like a weekly occurrence in Buffalo. Right now, Zach Moss still slightly seems to be the safer option on a weekly basis, but neither of these guys has had 100 total yards in a game so far this year. The touchdowns on the ground, not always there either. Josh Allen starting to run out there and look like a gazelle at times, taking away some of the opportunities from these running backs. Now, Tennessee allows right around 20 fantasy points per game, but in my opinion, I got to stick with the same guy I've started for the past couple weeks and go with Zach Moss. He's still the PPR guy, and he's getting the goal line touches. Outside of that, he's kind of touchdown dependent, but at least he's getting those opportunities, making him slightly safer, and that's the guy who I'll start here in week 6. All right, those are my starts and sits for the running back position here, week 6. Hopefully you enjoyed them. If you did, hit that like button down below. And don't forget, if you're watching this video and you have yet to subscribe, please subscribe to the channel. We're giving away things every single week. You know, we're giving something away. Let me figure this out here real quick. Every Thursday, we announce a giveaway for something we're going to give away on Friday. That's usually an autographed jersey or helmet or something. That's weekly. We also give away something every Sunday for our members-only live stream. We have the huge October giveaway through PrizePicks. I mean, subscribe here if you want a chance to win some really awesome stuff. Would love to have you around in this community for the rest of the year. Greatly appreciate all the support. The sub count continues to climb, and we greatly appreciate each and every one of you. Leave those comments down below. Let us know what you think about week 6 fantasy football, and we're looking forward to talking to you. So hopefully you have a great rest of your day, a great week, and we'll talk to you later.